I was born in South Africa, moved to America, and somewhere then after I started my first company in 1999 as an entrepreneur, which got bought shortly thereafter. The second company after that spent 7 years grinding it out, and we were ultimately bought by AT&T, which is a really, really complex company to sell into. And then most recently, Boku, which we started about 5 years ago. The premise of the company is to sell on the merchant side to merchants like these. So I did deals specifically with Electronic Arts, MasterCard, Facebook. And for those of you in the audience, how many of you are at companies where a big deal would make a difference to the success of your company? So only 6 of you guys would actually benefit from doing a deal with Facebook. Okay, so I should go home and let the next panel get up. But for those 6, I'm presenting to you. Doing a deal with MasterCard, Facebook, Zynga, Disney, those are super tough deals because essentially in your company, you know kind of what food to order from the food truck for the guys that sit next to you. When you go deal with those companies, you sit at the desk, and at that company, there are 5 people introducing themselves to each other because they've never met. And that happens all the time. And you're trying to sell into these organizations that have no idea what they're doing cross-departmentally, and they don't know who the sort of big sponsor is going to be. In addition to that, we also sold into carriers. So Boku's business was connected to the world's carriers. We did 270-odd deals. And then on the other side, we connect to merchants, so you can put a charge on the phone bill. The worst Goliaths to deal with are actually carriers. You could argue that the government might sort of be worse than that, but carriers are kind of tops. And so what I'm going to talk about is what it was like to work with these guys and 9 simple tips that I've picked up in terms of doing these deals. And since this is called the roundtable tent, instead of just talking at you, during each tip, anytime you want, just raise your hand and I'll kind of answer a question or any thoughts you might have around how that tip applies to maybe even a deal that you guys are working on. So the first one is to swarm the organization. In this case, you never know which department is going to be responsible for signing your deal or working with you. So what we do is figure out by swarming. So you get as many people as you can, or you just attack every part of the organization. Because it might be that it's procurement, God forbid, or it might be engineering, or it might be marketing or product, and you don't know when you're starting out who the departmental lead is going to be. The other thing about big companies is you might find some team or some partner that's really your sponsor, but there's a lot of churn. So by the time, if a deal at the big company takes 3 years, entire departments may have shuffled, people may have gone on to greener pastures. When I was doing our deal with Facebook, which is sort of a very seminal deal for Boku, I had 5 points of contact that were the sponsor, and you kind of have to start over each time, and so you really need to be able to build a rapport across the organization. And then you want to be able to find your sponsor. Your sponsor is essentially that one maverick inside the organization who doesn't care if he loses his job, where most people inside of an organization are afraid that they're going to lose their job. If you've gone to a big company as opposed to coming to Startupfest, how many people are at big companies right now? Who are you? Forgive the future insults that are going to happen in this presentation. You're doing a wonderful job. Ignore when these guys come and pull these tricks on you. So if you're at a big company, the thing that you're trying to do most likely is keep your job. It's not about taking big risks. And so you want to find those few folks, probably the folks that are here from the big companies, that actually have their finger on the pulse and really want to do interesting deals. When you find that maverick, you need to absolutely understand them. You need to get what their needs are. And in some ways, you have to help them get what they want out of life. And so one of the best things you can do is actually ask your sponsor what are their goals. And it's not necessarily about their goals like, I want to hit these monthly metrics. It could be those. But actually, in some cases, it could be, hey, I'm really trying to get promoted. I want to be the Under Assistant West Coast Regional Vice President. Well, you're going to help them do that by doing this deal. And you have to convince them that this deal is the thing that's going to get them that promotion. So understanding your sponsor and really getting them makes a big difference. So actually, one of the stories that I was thinking about was they're busy. And so understanding them is also understanding how much work that they have. If you're at a big company, unlike small companies, you're back-to-back in meetings all day long. You don't have time to sort of think all about this tiny startup that is bothering you with their idea, even if it is a great idea. So one of the things that I actually did was I got the target company's template So this was actually at AT&T. I got their template, built the entire slide deck for my sponsor so that he was able to just show up with the deck, click through it to his managers, and his managers thought, wow, what a wonderful job that this guy did this great presentation. That was sort of a good tip, actually, that you can take it that far. You can ask for their template and do the work for them. Which actually brings me to sort of the next point, which is really doing the work, doing their work. So you kind of are doing what nerds have done all through history. You're doing the homework for the jock. So in this case, you want to be able to figure out what their work is and do it for them. We actually, a lot of what we do is, and probably you as well, is connect into simple APIs. And you guys know how simple they are, and you don't understand why it's so difficult. But what we do, in terms of a contract that we're signing, sleeves off the vest. We'll say, hey, you know, as part of this contract, we will give you 100 hours of engineering time, and we will send our engineers to your site. And most often, you're just literally sending an engineer to sit next to some other engineer and help them read words off of a screen. Like, it's the kind of thing that they could do themselves, but it's a forcing function. Because then they actually have to slot the time. They feel guilty because Jane is now sitting in their cubicle, helping them open up a document and code up the API. So we did this. Someone raising their hand? Oh, no. So we did this with Electronic Arts, actually shipped people to their site and wired up the APIs. Has anyone done that? Yeah, one guy's done that, a couple. It is a very, very effective tactic. And you really, you know, you look like you're doing a wonderful thing. Another tip, like pro tip, by the way, by giving them 100 hours for free, it also means that you can charge when you go over 100 hours. And so you can bake that into the contract and turn it into a minor profit center. This next one is basically just be there. You really can't do deals over the phone. And if you're in Montreal and the company happens to be in San Francisco, doing webcam sessions just doesn't cut it. A lot of deals and most deals are really about relationships. You want to deliver a lot of value to your sponsor and to the company, but you also want to build a true relationship. You're not trying to work them as much as you really are trying to build some value together. If you're not doing that, you probably aren't doing the right thing. If you don't think you're really delivering value to the target company, you probably aren't. You probably should really think about what your product is and how you can change it so it really does deliver value. So this story around where I did this, do you guys know who that is, by the way? Mr. Okay, very good. So I was trying to do a deal with Spotify. Spotify's in Sweden, and one of anyone from Spotify here? Okay, good. So one, I was friends with a guy that was friends with Daniel Ek. And Daniel wasn't coming to San Francisco for sort of 2 or 3 months, and I really wanted to get the deal done. So I was on the phone with this crew, and it was a Thursday night, and they were talking to Daniel in the morning. And I said, tell Daniel I'm in town on Tuesday, and if he has time, it'd be great to meet. And so knowing that he wouldn't be in town, when that guy spoke to Daniel and said, oh, well, Ron's going to be in town on Tuesday, i.e. in Sweden from San Francisco, he said, oh, yeah, well, he could stop by for lunch. Next thing I did was get on back-to-back red eyes through Frankfurt to show up for an hour-and-a-half meeting with Daniel, you know, crumpled shirt and the whole thing, saying, oh, yeah, no, we were just hanging out. We had some other meeting with Nokia, and then close the deal with Spotify. Being there is half the battle, and that means sort of going the extra mile of jumping on an airplane, figuring out who your real targets are so you don't waste time. But one of the tricks of doing this is basically you send an email to your contact at Microsoft that you want to deal with, and you say, hey, I'm going to be in town the week of, and you choose something where you could be in town the week of. And if they happen to be in town that week, you schedule some time with them, and then you find the other companies in that region that would be worthwhile spending some time with. Is this helpful, by the way? All right. Anyone else done that, by the way? They're just like, I'll be in the neighborhood? Like, especially with VCs. Hey, I'll be in the neighborhood. You're not in the neighborhood. You just want my money. All right. After AT&T acquired Ingenio, I was responsible for product at AT&T Interactive. And I had a queue of 500 items that were stacked, that were the pet projects of everybody in the organization and the ones that sort of made sense. So you imagine that's what these big companies are dealing with, and your startup is showing up and saying, hey, I'd like to slot ahead of all of those other things that somebody else has asked for. And you guys manage your own queues as well, and you realize it's kind of hard to get stuff in even when you're doing a startup. So when you work with these guys, you want to be able to sort of prioritize and help them get the stuff done. What I call sort of tier up and peer up. In an organization, you want to be able to match your team, even though it's small, to their team so that there's an escalation path, that you have expertise at the sort of PM level with their PM, the engineer level with their engineer, and you as a BD guy are kind of sort of stepping back. Now, if you're a founder, you basically are doing BD and sales. If you don't get that, sort of see me afterwards. But being a founder of a company, you actually are always selling. You're selling to your investors, you're selling to the market, you're selling to your customers, and you clearly are selling to partners if partners are important to your deal. If you're the CEO or if you work for the CEO, make sure you don't take the CEO to all of the meetings. You know, at AT&T, before we got there, while we were selling in, a director chastised our VP of business development because he said, "You're a VP, you shouldn't be at a meeting with a set of directors." Right? So understanding that they view you, you need to sort of make yourself look bigger than you are. At Facebook, I was quoted in the New York Times, some sort of throwaway quote that said, "Yeah, I think Facebook payments could be used to eventually buy movie tickets one day." Some total, maybe nonsense kind of quote. The head of business development called my CEO and said, "Muzzle your dog because we don't want anyone talking about..." Anyone from Facebook here? Okay, good. Yeah, we don't want anyone talking about Facebook in the media. And Mark, by the way, the head of business development for Facebook used to work for my co-founder, so sort of an interesting dynamic. But Mark had never stepped foot on Facebook's headquarters, and so he was able to say, "Oh yeah, I will kick Ron's butt a little bit." And then that escalation path made Facebook say, "Okay, well, we really took care of that." If it was the CEO who had been quoted, there'd be nobody to go to. So having a nice pyramid of folks makes a big difference. Leverage your investors and advisors for that pyramid. These guys have the contacts. Make sure that so the VCs that are up here, in many ways, what you don't realize is if you have a board of investors, you don't work for them. Although it's structured that way, you should think of them as working for you. If you feel like you're working for them, the dynamic is off. They should be helping you. And the way that they can help you is via introductions and coming to meetings and pitches. So Khosla is invested in Boku. David Wyden from Khosla is phenomenal at this. He flew to T-Mobile with us and made the pitch. Not just sort of here's an email introduction, actually helped craft the pitch and join the meetings. Your VCs and your investors should do those things for you. That's why you brought them on. Using them smartly, of course. All right, the next one. Bringing PM and Eng to the table. So how many of you guys are actually BD in that function of BD? Okay, and how many of you are CEOs who are actually doing business development and sales? All right. When you're in that seat, when you're a BD person, the organization looks at you like a used car salesman. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to believe you. When you're a product manager and engineer, they believe that that's sort of gospel. So trying to bring product managers and engineers to the table when you're doing meetings is quite helpful. If you have inside sales and you're big enough to do that, that's great. If not, try and schedule some time with your engineers. Do you guys know the rule of yes? Okay. So every engineer is trained in some way to say no, especially as they've gotten more experience, because they've just gotten hosed by not saying no. So you need to retrain them in the art of yes. So let's practice. Can you make a rainbow? Well done. Everything is possible, right? Most of the stuff that a partner company is going to ask for is going to be useless nonsense, and they'll never implement it. But saying yes makes them feel like you're on their side. So we actually literally had to sit down with our engineers at Ingenio before we got to AT&T and train them, because when you realize that anything is actually possible with enough time and enough money, right? Think about that. Anything is possible with enough time and enough money. So when someone says, "I want a rainbow," you go, "Yeah, I could probably build you a rainbow, but I just need enough time, enough money." So you always start the sentence with yes, and then you can caveat the shit out of it. Anyway. Okay. No is just the beginning. So this doesn't apply to dating, only to business development. Okay? I just don't want to get in trouble later. So when you hear no, that's actually an amazing opportunity for you. When someone says to you no, you can say, "Okay, why?" And then they can tell you the reasons, the objections that they have to whatever pitch you've made. That gives you an opportunity to recraft it. Facebook said no to us 7 times. They had another partner implement it that did almost exactly what we did. But every no came back with, "Well, it's not more countries or it's not more carriers. What we need is this." "Oh, you need that? What's the answer to do you have that or can you build it?" "Yes." That's how we were able to get Facebook. So one of the other interesting things I did was, and this came from, I had a lot of friends who were sales guys. I'm actually a product guy by background. I've done 15 years of product, but got thrown into so much BD that I ended up taking over BD for our company. And so I got to view it through a different lens. It also helps if you're a product person selling, because you kind of actually are, you understand what your product does. But my sales friends taught me some of the tricks, and one of them was, I've got a boss, you've got a boss. This one feels slimy, but if you've built a relationship with your contact, it's kind of helpful. So I've got a boss, you've got a boss goes like something like this. Sorry, Ron, we don't want to do a deal with you. And then you come back to them a few days later and go, oh, shit, my boss is really going to kick my ass over this one. You know, I know you know what it's like. You got a boss who probably kicks your ass, right? Can we just have one more shot? And you're appealing to the human nature of someone who understands that you can get your butt kicked by your boss. You probably are your own boss, so then you take it, ugh, the board is going to kill me over this. Please, can we have one more shot? All right, this is a funny one, selling on fear. So selling on fear is actually how you motivate big corporations. They're less opportunistic than they are afraid that they're going to get disintermediated, innovated underneath. So selling to their fear, the fear that you will miss a trend, is a great way to go. They've all read Innovator's Dilemma, but they can't innovate their way out of a paper bag. You guys are the innovators. You need to show them that working with you guys is actually a great way to go. One of the ways you do this is set artificial deadlines. So with MasterCard, we did this deal, and Mobile World Congress, the big mobile congress, happens sort of every February. And we had a big platform that we were launching. And the artificial deadline was, hey, if you want to be on stage with us while we're keynoting at Mobile World Congress, you have to have the deal signed. We won't put you on stage unless the deal is signed. We had MasterCard working over a weekend, which I think is like a miracle. Leverage the fear of competition. So they see, if you're able to sort of point out that if you're doing this deal with MasterCard, that if they didn't do a deal with you, there's a chance that you're going to go do a deal with Visa, but gosh, I really like you guys at MasterCard a lot better, right? All of this feels kind of slimy, by the way, but it just works. Don't be afraid of trials. So when you're working with a big company, they kind of often say, well, how about we just try you in the southwest region of Ghana? And you're like, that market sucks. Do it. Because once you're connected, you can spread out like a virus. If you're connected, it's so much harder for your competitor to be connected afterwards, because they'll just go, well, we already got Ghana live, so we may as well roll out to Kenya. All right. And then the very last one is offsite to close. So give the team that you're working with some great vision of where they will be able to get to once they've done this deal with you. So if you, for example, we did this with Sony. Sony was down in San Diego. We took the team to Las Vegas, and we treated it like, well, this is going to be a working session, but the entire team knew that it was going to be a lot of fun, and then you also were able to leverage some work. So you're building that rapport in the tiered group that you've put together, and you're actually essentially transitioning into the kickoff. Because winning a deal isn't always winning a deal. There are plenty of deals that have been won but never actually go live, and losing a deal per the no is just the beginning isn't always losing a deal. So that was it. And I'm open to any questions. Thank you. Any questions? One in the back, yes.
So I think for Kate, you said sell on fear. Now we're always told like sell the benefits, but they kind of, how do they work together?
So you're starting out with the benefits, but you've got to go in every once in a while and go, you have to tactfully do this, but you do have to scare somebody that they would look like they lost their job if they, let me back up for a second. You're starting out with the benefits. And if the benefits sell themselves, God bless. A lot of times they don't, because they don't get it. They're not going to understand the product the way that you understand the product. They're not going to understand the market opportunity. So going in and saying, look, wouldn't you just feel like a complete asshole if your boss saw that you didn't do something in the social media space when Facebook's taking off? Like, you need to have some sort of play there, and I'm your low-cost, simple integration play, and I don't want you to feel stupid. I'm here to help you. Sure. So the question was, how do you swarm the org? Like, do you cold call? What do you do? So first of all, LinkedIn is one of the best tools that you can use as a business development executive. You need to figure out how you're connected to these folks. when you're connected to them, you can stalk them. Think about how you got your girlfriend. Right? Right? You watched what she said on Twitter, and you showed up at the places where she was. Or he. I don't know. I'm from San Francisco, whatever. I'm not judging. So you go where they are, and you attend the events that they're, and you build real relationships across the organization. And that's how you need to almost find your soft spot, not even your sweet spot, your soft spot, where if you think of it as sort of a castle, you want to be able to find a way in. And once you have a way in, you then can start to be asked to be introduced around the organization. I know BD guys who, they'll get a lunch meeting with someone that they know and then sit in the lobby of the company. It sounds ridiculous, but actually you'll meet people as you're sitting there. You realize an old friend went to go work there, and you start the relationships that way.
What was the best strategy that you used to secure a beta customer versus doing a free trial to a paying customer?
So the question was, what was the best strategy of getting a beta customer to move to a sort of a full-blown integration customer? I'm going to start out a step before that I actually haven't thrown in as a tip, because I think this is quite helpful. I have no funny way of saying this. This is just sort of, it's called, there's a term called check kiting. You know what check kiting is? Where you write one account and then you keep funding it from another account until you run out of money and get caught by the government and go to jail. It's just like that. So what you want to do is do a deal with a small company. So at Ingenio, we did a deal with AOL. It wasn't a small company, but we did a deal with AOL first, where they got a full integration so that we had a reference client. They call them lighthouse accounts. So if you're going in the travel market, you'd go after Southwest, because Southwest, though it's not the biggest, is the most innovative. Once you have Southwest, you can then go over to United. How you get a trial to move to a broader agreement or a broader implementation, there's lots of things you can do. The first thing is deliver real value. So make sure that your company is on top of whatever it is that you're delivering. The next thing is assure that you have dedicated account resources to that deal, so that they are working the deal. So you're not implementing and letting it go and just reading some reports hoping it goes well. If you want this deal to be big and it's only small in Africa, but you want it to be across Europe and the Americas, then you need to have somebody working each day to show how if they just lit this up, if they just flip this bit, they'd be making this much more money. And especially I don't know what your product is, but once you're integrated, if it's not hard to light up greater regions or greater traffic, then the argument if they can make more money is sort of the easiest one.
So is it more to study the analytics that they're using, or sorry, is it better to study the analytics of what the customer is using the product for or how, and then coming back to highlighting the key points?
Exactly. That's what I mean by sort of watching the numbers. Your metrics are one thing, but it's the metrics that they care about that you should be watching. So if it's retained customers, if it's ARPU, if it's LTV, those you figure out what their metric, which you should have gotten from the sponsor piece. When you know what his or her metric is, you're working your implementation to deliver on that metric in that trial, so that you can prove that if you rolled it out to other regions, countries, people, it would deliver those same results. Sure. All right, then looks like it's about it. Oh, one more? You don't. The question was, how do you get them to move at a faster pace? I think the artificial deadlines is one of the best, which is this ship is going to sail. Be careful how you play that one, though, because you don't want to bluff too hard. You got to be ready to walk away if you're going to make that bluff. But I found sort of the artificial deadlines to be one of the best ones, and the fear of competition to be another. So trying to, what we used to call land the planes at the same time, which would be you work several deals that are competitive at the same time. So you can say, if you're in the payment space, it's MasterCard versus Visa, American Express. If it's a travel space, Expedia, Travelocity, et cetera. You can see how you can try and get all of those. The other thing, you've heard lots of people say this about startups and about business in general, which is realizing there's tons of opportunity. It's more important what you say no to, right? You really need to figure out what you're going to say no to. And so figuring out which deals are the ones that are going to be the tombstone deals for you. Like if you know that this one deal is the thing that's going to make or break you, then align your resources towards that and cut a lot of the extra stuff. So if you have 10 little companies that you would work on, don't work on those 10 little companies unless they're specifically going to help you close that big one. You in the back.
Hi, Sally. A question in terms of, like you mentioned it briefly, but when it comes to, I guess, like negotiation tactics, when it comes to larger companies, especially for a smaller startup, they're going into it. It's really, they sort of always just want to say yes. So from your extent, like what sort of biggest problems, I guess, things that companies use?
So the question was basically, I'll make it somewhat broader. How do you as a small company negotiate with a big company, and what pitfalls are there? So the best thing you can possibly do, and with low likelihood that it will happen, is you do the first pass of the contract. And it doesn't happen that often, but when you do, things go a lot smoother and a lot quicker. If you're doing, we dealt with carriers. Carriers will show up with an inch-thick contract, and there's nothing you can do about it. Right? So when negotiating with those guys, figure out what are your existential risks and negotiate around those, but don't get hung up on too much stuff. Like the biggest mistake, and I've made this mistake, we had a deal that was on the table, and I was trying to close this deal, but I wanted to make it perfect, and I felt like I could squeeze this extra bit of revenue out of this company. And eventually it just took so long that the whole deal fell apart. And then at one beer garden, it was a German company, at one beer garden party, they met one of our competitors, and that competitor was local, and they just did the deal. So be a startup in the way that you're negotiating, because most of what happens with a contract goes on a shelf when you're done. It's really the implementation and the real world scenarios that matter once you're live. And you can renegotiate stuff later. So I guess taking that one level higher, which is don't sweat the small stuff. Just figure out what would kill your company, like, oh, well, we're gonna turn into a professional services organization for them. That's one of the worst things you can do is say, we're gonna build a lot of custom stuff for you. Try not to do that unless you absolutely have to. But so, and then focus on the things that would kill your company and let go of the rest. It's helpful to find a BD guy that's actually had product background, that has empathy, because let me back up for a second. The difference between business development and sales, in my perspective, if the product is baked that person is selling and they're just negotiating on price, that's sales. If they're working out custom implementations with partnerships that extends your platform and extends their platform, that's much more business development. Salespeople, you just look at their W-2 from last year. I don't know what they call it here. You look at how much money they made last year, and if they sucked last year, you don't hire them. If they did a good job last year, you hire them. It's that simple, and that's easy. Business development people, it's really difficult. And my tips are going to be somewhat weak on this, because I think finding founders who have failed is a great way to go, because sometimes you just fail because of bad luck. It's not because you weren't good. So those guys are going to be hungry, but actually get broader. They're going to have a wider aperture. So having product sense is another way to go. Don't hire out of big companies. Don't hire the BD guy from Google. Don't. He took, you know what a BD guy at Google does? He picks up the phone and takes orders as it rings. Like, that's what a BD guy from Google does. You want the guy that had to swarm the org and knock on the doors and get 700 no's and still be able to stand back up again. Don't hire from Visa. Don't hire from any, and I'm choosing Google on purpose, because they look like they're not a startup, but they look like they're a new company, and the people there are going to be fresh and new. They're not like those big carriers. I'm not saying this about everybody. I have a lot of good friends at Google, but in general, those folks are not awesome because they just aren't hungry. They've either made a bunch of money, they got free snacks all day long, they got a massage and the laundromat and all the whole thing. You want somebody hungry. All right. There we go. So the question was, how do you train a BD person? Some of business development is sort of instinctual. Do you understand people? Can you empathize what their needs are? It's similar to product, but actually more social. In product, you have to disconnect and view yourself as someone else and really be that 55-year-old house mom playing Zynga petting her cat, right? Whereas in business development, you actually need to connect with another person as who you are. And so you can't train that in many cases. You need to find people who can connect with other people that also have sort of analytical chops, et cetera. You have to do what you do with the people that you have. The best you can do is sort of give them tips like this, have them really understand the product, and kick their ass when they're not hungry and working hard enough. All right, I think that's my time. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. It's fun.